Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am Barbara Sari, Dean of Undergraduate Education here at UC San Diego, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Education Initiative to this event today, a forum to talk about faculty experiences with technology here at UC San Diego, and we have an experienced and learned crew of people to have a discussion today. We originally were going to call this, we had the word MOOCs in the title, and that last year that meant something. This year it doesn't seem to have the same cachet as it did, and a lot of people don't even know what it is because things are moving so fast. So we changed the title, but we have a wonderful group of people here, and I'm going to let Scott Klemmer introduce himself and the panel, right? And I'll turn this over to you.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to be here. And what we're going to do today is we're each going to take about 5 minutes to offer our thoughts on our experiences in teaching groups. All of us here have taught one of the massive online classes offered through UCSD. And then we'll open it up for discussion. And I have a ton of questions that I have for the panelists. And I bet you do too. This is one topic where there is never a shortage of discussion, and really this whole event is for you, and so you should think about what questions do you want to ask of the folks here, given that we have a really great group assembled today. So, I bet you'll have as many questions as I do. And I taught the first massive online class to use peer assessment, and we worked with Coursera to develop that system. And I think for me, that's a really interesting opportunity to have a perspective shift where we're moving from massive online education that is just delivery of lecture content to where the sage on the stage only now delivered over the internet to opportunities for creating peer learning experiences online. And for me, I think that's a pretty big deal. And it's been amazing to see in the 2 years, almost exactly to the day actually, since we first launched the interaction class. We've had more than 175,000 signups for the class. We'll be offering it for the 5th time starting on June 30th. And I think there's a lot of really cool opportunities there. Thinking about it from a campus perspective, which is one of the focuses today, I see a big opportunity for us to move away from students taking 4 classes a quarter, 4 quarters a year, 4 years to graduate if you're lucky. And I think we can start to think about how we might move towards more mastery learning-based approaches. Now that we have all of this rich interactive content and are creating more of it, how do we move to more of a mastery learning approach? And I think that's going to have big impacts for the local environment here. What makes sense in terms of classroom space for Sage on the Stage classes where the lecture chairs are bolted forward is not what you want in a studio-based class, in a project-based class, in a flipped classroom. And so I think one institutional capacity that we need to develop is creating more of that. And thinking about things, for example, like in creative classes, how do we have a portfolio be the record rather than just a grade? Or how can we enable, if we're going to have, as several folks here have done, you watch the content at home and then you come in on your own time at your own schedule to do work. How do we have labs and studios that are open whenever students want to come, not just during class hours? Now, we're a research university here, and I think that for me, one of the biggest opportunities that we have is integrating research into teaching. UCSD has a long history with this. I think one of the things that really made the university great in the 70s and 80s and continues to this day has been scientifically based research into learning. There have been a number of outreach programs that Mike Cole and others have been doing for decades, really giving us more knowledge about how students learn, and at the same time having a real impact with students here and in the broader community. And one of the things that I want to talk all of us together about today is what does that integrated research and teaching look like going forward? How can we really leverage all of the knowledge around campus to do that better? And one thing that I think has been really fun about being here is I'm struck by, all of the panelists here wouldn't be told no about offering their classes online. And great to see how the administration and others were really supportive of being able to figure out how do we get these classes online. And I think it's always great when universities have this sort of two faces of Janus experience, where on one hand we can be incredible optimists and change agents and move really quickly, and on the other hand there are these mysterious forces of bureaucracy that can be like quicksand and drag good ideas down. And it's been awesome to see how here in the online education world the excitement of opportunity has won out over the fear, and I think now the charge for all of us is what are we going to do with that. So I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and they'll tell you about their own.
Yes, I'm going to start. Okay, my name is Steve Mayfield. I am faculty in molecular biology in the Division of Biology, and I'm also director of an organized research unit here on campus called Food and Fuel for the 21st Century. And I've been teaching in class in bioenergy, sustainable energy, for the last 4 years now. I sort of created it out of whole cloth about 4 years ago. And my reasoning for sort of coming over and putting this into a massive course was, even now I'm teaching the class again as a live course again this spring, although I've now integrated about 20 of the videos that we filmed for the MOOC here. But even now, quite often I will get students come up to me and say, "Oh, I've been here at UC San Diego for 4 years, and this is the first class that finally impacts my life." And not that engineering and chemistry and biology and the rest of the things. I mean, we teach lots of skills that students go out and do, but I'm amazed at how little our students know about energy and the connection between energy and everything we do, whether it's the information you get off your iPhone and how much electricity that uses. You all know that your iPhone uses more power than your refrigerator, right? Everybody knows that one, right? They just didn't understand these connections. So for me, it was simply, if what I think are pretty sophisticated students at a pretty sophisticated university, UC San Diego, are completely unaware of how energy impacts their life, like where gasoline and where electricity comes from, and why most of the problems in the world now are actually due to energy and the cost of food because of the cost of energy. If they don't know that, then how in the world would anybody else? And so for me, it was simply a matter of, this is not tough content in terms of theory. I'm not teaching mathematical theory here. I don't have to have really quality one-on-one time with students to explain intricate theories. I simply have to educate them and give them the knowledge that, here's where energy comes from, here's how we use it, here's the impact of energy on the environment, here's the impact of energy on the economy, here's how it's causing all of the problems that you guys are seeing now, whether those are social or economic problems, water and energy. So it was simply a matter of, how do I get that out to every student on this campus? And then while we were thinking about that, it's like, well, why stop there, right? Let's just get it out to more people. And of course, in bioenergy has been a very trendy topic, so I get invited all over the world. And almost every place I go and give a talk, I hear the same thing from the people in the audience. Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea there's 7.2 billion people in the world right now, and that we reached peak oil, and that fracking is at least $100 a barrel to get out of the ground. So it was simply, what's the most efficient way to get this information out to the greatest number of people? Now, I went to the university and I said, hey, you guys have to give me money so I can make a MOOC. And that was received with great enthusiasm. And the show of that was the $0 that I got. But everybody loved the idea, right? I will say they were very enthusiastic about the idea. And then fortunately for me, about a year and a half ago in December, we got an email, and I don't remember who forwarded it to me, that Google was offering a grant to create a massive online course. So the greatest reviews I've ever gotten in my life. We submitted our proposal at Wednesday, 4 in the afternoon, and at 9 o'clock the next morning, I got $50,000. I got an email saying, where do we deposit the $50,000? So we took that $50,000, and then I decided, rather than have me just stand up there and record 30 or 40 lectures talking about all the different forms of energy, that I was at a fantastic place. And so I went out and convinced 30 other faculty here on campus in economics and engineering and biology and political science and you name it to come in, and we recorded them right here in the studios right here. We launched a smaller version of this with about 12 of those lectures 3 months ago and got through that just to make sure that we didn't get completely creamed by the internet community, and that worked very well. So now we've got actually 44 lectures now. And the class will launch June 9th, and we'll see how it goes. But I have to say the recording of it and the putting it together, although that was a lot of work, and writing the content was a lot of work. At least as I look at the content now, I think it's fantastic, and it should be ready to launch everywhere in the UC. I'll finish just by saying one last thing, though. UC put out from the Office of the President, had a thing to do, so I put an application in for that. And amazingly enough, I got one of the reviewers back. So this is one of a UC faculty said, I have no idea why these people are proposing to do this. They have completely inappropriate content in this lecture that should not be given to students on this campus. And I went back through and looked at the syllabus, and the only thing I can think of is that we have 2 lectures on climate change, right? And so that was one of your colleagues who wrote that. And in the good old UC tradition, 1 out of 3 was enough to sink it, so we got no dough to put this as a UC course. But I think somehow, as Scott said, I'm not going to take no for an answer, so we'll find a way to get this as a UC-wide required course. Okay. And I see my time is up.
Hi, my name is William Ettouati. I teach at the School of Pharmacy, School of Medicine. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. Our course was basically the first course at UCSD to be online, to be offered online. And it was kind of interesting because, to give you some idea, my course has been taught here at UCSD for the past 6 years to students of School of Medicine, School of Pharmacy, biomedical students, ready business students, and UC Irvine School of Law students that we do by video conference. And in order for me to offer my course on Coursera, I had to get 5 schools' approval, but also go all the way to the chancellor to basically get UCSD to sign with Coursera. So I'm glad that today there is many more faculty that are interested in doing what at the time my co-chair and I, Joe Ma, were kind of like Don Quixote on the donkey and going to try to get this signed. So I'm really happy to see that there's many people interested in this. So we were the first course from UCSD to be offered. Our course is in drug discovery, development, and commercialization. So very, very technical. It's primarily for PharmDs or MDs or PhDs and MBAs, who most of them actually have graduate degrees, who are interested in entering either the biotechnology industry, the FDA, the CDC, or pharma or academia, and really want to understand better the process of what does it take to get a target all the way from target to basically commercialization. And the way so why did I want to do this? Call me kind of kind of a nerd from that perspective, but I've always been involved with and very interested in online education. So I have kids, like many of you, I'm sure. They were on Khan Academy probably the first time it started out. I was on MIT OpenCourseWare. So I've always been very interested by the power that the internet has been able to offer from the perspective of learning at your own time in anywhere where you might be and use the time very efficiently. So what we wanted to do was basically do a couple of things. One was educate people better about what does it take to develop and discover a drug. And the way we did this, rather than Dr. Ma and I pontificating to students, because of the 20 years I spent in industry before coming to UCSD, we had a lot of contact in industry, and we said, why don't we create the course, and that was 6 years ago, in such a manner that we are going to bring experts from different fields. So if you are doing drug discovery, we're going to go to people who do drug discovery for a living day in, day out. If you do development, we're going to go to MDs that are doing clinical developments on a multinational basis. If you're doing marketing, that's a lot of my background, we are going to do that as well. So we basically pulled about 11 speakers throughout major pharma companies, FDA, and biotech companies to provide classes. And when we first started the course 6 years ago here, it was an experiment. And fortunately, I have a dean that is very supportive, Dean Taylor, who is now stepping down after being one of the founding dean for the School of Pharmacy and after being dean for 10 years. Has always been a great researcher and has always been welcoming actually things as experiments. So he has been very supportive since the beginning. And also he was one of the reasons that we were able to actually put our course on Coursera, because he gave me $5,000 to do the videos. I didn't know about Google, otherwise I would definitely apply there at the time. Make a long story short, what was really interesting from our perspective is we wanted to be able to recreate what we had done here at UCSD in a much broader scale. So first of all, put SSPPS, Skype School of Pharmacy, online and being known, because we're only about 12 years old now as a school, and be able to offer to people something that's a better understanding of the whole process, but also at the same time to get more visibility here, and potentially also starting to think for our students how to better learn throughout the process. So when we put that, I had discussion with Daphne Kohler, who is one of the founder of Coursera. She came out here, had really amazing discussions. When we put it online, I was expecting to have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 students the first time. And by the time we started the course, we had about 17,000 students, which was mind-blowing to me. We ended up with 20,000. About, I think, 600 of them actually paid like a nominal fee to do a certified certificate, meaning that they would have taken all the quizzes and did the project. One of the unique pieces about the course, which was very interesting, and we'll talk more maybe after this since I see I only have 50 seconds left, was that we asked the students to work in multifunctional team on an international basis, with the idea on a project, with the idea to have an MD, a PhD, a PharmD, an MBA, and a lawyer work together in creating a business plan on a drug. And I'll tell you more about that later.
I'm Pavel Pevzner at Computer Science, and my take on MOOCs will be a little bit radical, and I'm sure most people in this room will not agree, but I personally do not believe in MOOCs as we know it today. But then let me explain why I decided to start my MOOC. First, I truly believe that online education is better than me in the classroom. And I believe that for most technical discipline, it is probably true. I'm not sure whether it's true for history, but for many disciplines in computer science, I suspect in biology, I would prefer to take an online course than to go to live lecture. However, it should be a special online course, not the course that most MOOCs now offer. Second, I saw firsthand, when I went for my sabbatical in Russia, I saw firsthand how privileged we are at UCSD, and how terrible is education in some not so fortunate places. I came from a great tradition of teaching mathematics in Russia a long time ago, but when I came for sabbatical 4 years ago, I saw that education in mathematics is still okay, but education in computer science is horrifying in modern discipline. And I thought the only way to fix it is actually to develop online course, because it takes enormous amount of time to train professors. And that's why I decided to do my MOOC. But then what I realized is that if I was given $50,000, I would feel it's nowhere close to what I need to accomplish. The minimum amount for a modern MOOC, I believe, is $500,000. Because in a technical discipline, a MOOC is nothing but a talking head. I believe into MOOCs that promote active learning and adaptive learning, something that professor working in the classroom has limited possibility to accomplish. By active, I mean that student can at any time actively engage in solving problems. When student doesn't understand something in a particular discipline, students should take back from the classroom and solve the problem. The notion of homework as a set of 5 problems that you solve on the weekend is so outdated. The problems should be delivered at the exact times they are needed in technical discipline. How many times you would walk at a lecture as a technical discipline and 10 minutes afterwards would lose the speaker completely? I have experienced it all the time. Imagine our students. The research and education tells us that 50% of students do not get it. And that's a pedagogical failure that we have to address. MOOCs do not have this problem. You don't have to sync with the speed of professor. You can slow down professor, sync with whatever speed you want, and then solve the problems that help you to address the challenge at the time when you want. But active is not enough. What traditional classroom teaching completely fails is adaptive learning. And learning should be adaptive. We're all different. I'm a very slow thinker. You may be much faster. So if a professor chooses something in between, it probably will make a good work for me, but for you, faster learner, you're bored. You don't follow the lecture. And that happens all the time in my classes. That's why my goal to develop MOOC was to make myself obsolete in the room, in the classroom, and I hope to some extent I achieved it because I really tried it in the room, in classrooms this year, and I feel that outcome was so much better than my traditional classroom teaching. Now, how to achieve it? How to achieve adaptive learning? I personally feel that MOOCs 3 years from now will be completely different. Not as what we see today. That's why investing in the format of existing MOOCs for university, I think is a lost proposition. MOOCs will change. How they will change? We see the emergence of MOOCs at top universities. Their price tag is coming to $1 million. These are the MOOCs for the future because this will become extremely competitive place. There will be only 3 MOOCs in calculus. All others will become obsolete. There will be maybe 3 MOOCs in algorithms with massive degrees, and all others will disappear from the landscape. That's why MOOCs that invest $50,000, $100,000 in technical discipline will disappear. What will arrive are highly sophisticated MOOCs with huge investment in infrastructure. This infrastructure are sophisticated learning material. Talking head is extremely ineffective way to do adaptive learning because when you want to be adaptive, you want to complement your talking head with a textbook quality material because textbook is actually can be adaptive. You can change it after every lecture. You see that student doesn't understand something, you can send student to this detour or to this paragraph or to this chart station, whatever. So student can catch up and then return back to the main material. Unless we do this adaptive learning and active learning, that MOOCs that we develop are nothing more than just trying to bring our standard experience from the classroom to online space, which from my perspective turns into talking head on the screen. And that's not how I view online learning. I don't know.
As you can see, we have a couple of small, modest goals. And what I'm curious about to start out the questions is, what do each of you see as the biggest opportunity for innovation here at UCSD? What can we do to leverage the strength of what's here and do something that's different than what other places do?
So from my perspective, the greatest advantage that I had being an energy guy here was that energy is not one discipline, right? It's engineering, it's biology, it's social science, it's all of these things. And to be able to draw on the depth of people who are really experts in this and to bring them all together gave us an opportunity to do something that other places can do, certainly MIT and Stanford, and there are other places that can do it, but I think we can do it really well here. So that was the biggest advantage for me.
You mean at UCSD in particular? I think at UCSD we are almost doomed because we are so much behind the curve in online education. Yesterday there was full-day meeting on legal issues related to online education on campus. And essentially the conclusion was that basically there is no institutional commitment. There are particular people at university that really support this idea, like Ramesh is here. But institutionally, I see zero commitment for develop serious MOOC developments. And it shows, because we are behind almost all university on Coursera with respect to number of courses. We have 4 courses, and you brought your course from Stanford, right? So in 1.5 years, UCSD has offered 3 courses. That's a spectacular administrative failure from my perspective if we declare that MOOCs is our goal, if that online education is our goal. And from this perspective, I think since we are so much behind, we are in rural China, right? And from this perspective, the only way for us to succeed is to go directly from landline telephone to mobile phone, which means to figure out what are the angle of MOOCs we can still be competitive. We need to do something that distinguishes us from 100 other universities that are so much ahead of us. UC Irvine is so much ahead of us, right? I don't talk about Berkeley, of course, or Stanford, or Harvard, or MIT. Therefore, the only thing is to have a focus, develop certain angle, and lead this in this angle.
So maybe I'm more optimistic. Maybe it's because I like to ride the donkey and be in the front. It's kind of interesting. At the school, we have there is a building in telemedicine, and UCSD is leading in the area as well as we are in bioengineering. I think we can potentially lead. I agree that we are behind. There's no questions about it. I mean, I just have to see what I had to do to try to get this approved. But I think that with the new chancellor, who is a computer science major by background and comes from a private university, maybe that will help substantially. I agree that we need substantial amount of funding. To be honest, the way I did this was really on a shoestring, and because I had a lot of connections, I was able to get quality speaker. I think the issue is going to be in the quality that we have to offer. There's another fundamental issue which I think is scaring a lot of people, which is that are we going to offer free education to everyone? I mean, that's the big problem. You were talking about areas where they don't have access. In my experience, we had students through around the world who took, probably like you guys, who took the class. And some people felt, even $100 was too much for the certificate. So that's another thing. I think there are other issues where people are very concerned. And you were saying, for example, that you want to make yourself almost redundant. It's kind of interesting because many faculty I know are have come to me when I was talking about this and said, well, then they are not going to need you anymore. And that's the wrong way to look at it. Actually, you're going to be able to give individual instruction. We talk about personalized medicine. I give courses on that as well. We need to have personalized instruction. It's a huge problem. I mean, I see it where, as was described, we provide, here's and I have a math undergrad, so I also like mathematics. I still do calculus with my kids for fun. I'm kind of weird that way. But I see how the teachers in high school, for example, are teaching. Well, here's the book, and here's the chapter, and you do a chapter a week because you're on a semester basis, so you basically have 50 problems. And if you don't understand it, if you don't have anybody else there to help explain it to you, you're on your own. Well, MOOC to some extent are a bit different from my perspective in the sense that they have forums where people can actually help each other. And we might talk maybe later on about this on another questions. So I think, again, we have a great opportunity ahead of us, but we need to have some budgets being put behind it, because without any money, we're not going to be able to do much. And I don't know what the dollar figure is. I was just reading, I think it was yesterday, Harvard is investing substantial amount of dollars in creating actually MOOCs. I mean, I'm talking really, really big dollars, in the orders of millions of dollars to actually do this in a professional manner. We'll see if they can make money out of it, but it's a different story.
One of the things that I really liked about the emphasis that both of you had in terms of personalized instruction and adaptive learning, and I think that's exactly right, is that it puts into perspective that interaction value, what the student engagement is, what the student's actually learning, is more important than production value. And I think that that's been a mistake that a number of people have made, is they say, well, if we buy the fanciest video camera on the market, our MOOC will be better than all the others. And my hunch is that cinematic focus is not going to be the differentiator. And I think one thing that very well could be is the excitement and enthusiasm around online education right now is huge. And it's caused a lot of people to very reasonably ask the question, well, how do we know if these are good for anything? How do we know if anybody's learning anything? And then the next question that follows is, well, how do we know if anybody's learning anything in the lecture-based classrooms that we've had for centuries? And we actually, for a campus that values, for a academia writ large that so strongly values empiricism, it's shocking how little we actually do. And so whether we're riding donkeys or get serious financial support, how do we know? I mean, I agree very much with the thrust of this, that we need to throw ourselves full steam ahead in an exciting new direction that focuses on adaptive and personalized learning. As we head in that direction, how do we give, even for ourselves, feedback about whether we're on the right track, more than just students tell me they like it?
May I add something? So I personally know nothing about the quality of teaching of my colleagues in computer science department. As a result, when the promotion case comes through, the only reliable feedback I can get are student evaluations that are extremely unreliable and may evaluate completely different things. I think the cheapest investment in improving quality of teaching on campus would be simply to set up camera in every room. So professors would know that when they teach, and there are some, as great as UCSD is, there are some not so great professors on campus. So when they walk in the room and know that there is a camera there, it will automatically improve the quality of teaching.
Yeah. Well, so I certainly agree with part of that, which is, I have to say, when I watch my own YouTube videos, although they are occasionally embarrassing, right, they're certainly informative for me to improve my own style. But so I was the dean at Scripps for many years, and so we always had to look at the student evaluations. And invariably, students evaluate whatever instructor can tell the most jokes and make our lecture the most pleasant and give exams that aren't too hard. Those professors always rate really highly. And I know this now because I'm rated really highly in biology, right? And faculty that actually demand from their students or have tough material are always evaluated much lower. And I think that's completely independent of the educational value to the students. So clearly we don't have a good metric to measure it now. Another point that I would make is that we have many layers of education that we are attempting to get across to our students. And so in many ways it's kind of, well, I will never play music and I will never know music theory, but I like to listen to it, right? And I think my world is enriched because I know about it. So not to be too shallow, but the course I give, I'm not trying to teach these people how to produce energy. I'm not trying to teach them a technical skill, on how to produce food or even to improve the environment. I'm trying to make them aware of that in such a way that it enriches their life so that they make better informed decisions. So I think in many ways we have to ask, which we do, what are our learning goals? What do the students want to get out of this? And then attempt to measure only with that metric. Because for me, I would be creamed if somebody came out of it and said, well, what do your students know about the refining process? Not much.
So it's a bit different for us because our course is, again, so technical, and our class is also an elective, meaning that the students actually choose to come to take our class, which is not a requirement. And we tell them at the beginning, you're going to learn as much as you put into the class because they are working into multifunctional group teams. The idea was to actually create within the classroom mini companies. So if you want to do a startup, you come to and take our class, you're going to be working with people who are in different environments. And it's not that you're going to be able to do a startup after 30 hours, but you're going to have a much better understanding of what the drug discovery and development process is all about. So the way that I evaluate whether or not our course is useful is by the feedback and by the students who then end up working in industry afterwards, either in pharma or biotech, or go to academia, and then write back to me or my co-chair and say, hey, Dr. Ettouati or Dr. Ma, your course was really, really helpful. It really helped me understand how, for example, regulatory affairs is implicated in the development process and what it has to do. So that's how we get the feedback. It's not immediately after the course has been given. It's really after the student has graduated and is working and can go back and say, well, gee, because of this course, I was able to do, to orient my career towards that area specifically versus another. So from my standpoint, it's a bit different. But I would agree that, for more fundamental, like let's say calculus or even computer science, and then, if I take a look at my kids, for example, and when they come back I'm both in high school, and they come back and they tell me about their teachers. Well, for example, the math teacher right now who is teaching Calc 3 and linear algebra, he told the students, and these are students that are advanced in high school when you are doing this as junior students. He said this to the students. He says, well, you guys are going to learn on your own, and that's the way it's going to be in college. And I looked at my son and I said, what kind of baloney is this? I'm paying an extra $800 for each of the classes, and you're telling me that your professor is saying that you're going to learn on your own? So does he have anything that you can actually use online? So I went to talk to him about it. And he said, well, maybe it was taken a bit too drastically, and he's actually a pretty good guy. I mean, I've had discussions with him. But it was one of the situations which is basically, it's either swim or sink. And it reminded me of my high school, which is centuries ago, where basically it was, here's the book and do it yourself. And I went through the French education system, so I can tell you it's not one of these things where you pamper people. It's not as bad as Russia, I would say, though. We didn't get sent anywhere. But from that perspective, when I hear this, and that's in some of the top high schools in San Diego County, this is the Del Mar School District, I'm a bit flabbergasted that a high school teacher who has students, from high school who are looking to do basically college calculus, who are very motivated, really want to be there to learn, are being told, yeah, do it yourself. I mean, to me, that's really unbelievable. And I think it's a big disservice to the students. And I would agree that here at the university, there are a number of faculty, regardless of the schools, where if you were to start to poll the students would say, yeah, this sucks, this course sucks, because the instructor basically is not putting the effort or the interest into it. And that's, I think, is a big issue. And that's where we can make a difference.
I have something to add for this, because I have 2 kids graduating from UC Berkeley in the last 3 years. And I have the third one finishing UC Santa Barbara. And they're not excited about education in Berkeley, undergraduate education. They both are straight-A students. They're not excited about education at Berkeley. During all their time at Berkeley, they probably overall had, at best, 5-10 hours one-on-one with professor. For most classes, they went to the room, like UCSD is teaching computer science in the room of 400 people. I think it should be made illegal. If we cannot teach in normal room technical subject, we should send students to reasonable online course. It will be, I think, almost everybody in the department would actually agree that there is somebody teaching who taught calculus in the room of 500 people. Do you think it's useful for students? Only 400. It was horrible. So why UCSD is doing it? If UCSD would really listen to students and to parents like me, I think these classes should be banned. And UCSD should find other way to teach students if we cannot economically provide reasonable class size.
And I think one thing that's interesting about that is that the online world opens up the opportunity for a much higher dynamic range experience in terms of the faculty-student engagement that as opposed to taking the number of students and dividing it by the number of faculty in a field and saying, well, that's going to be the class size. You can instead say, well, here we actually want to provide a shoulder-to-shoulder experience one-on-one. And to make up for that, because the faculty hours need to come from somewhere, there may be something else, which is a self-paced online system. And I think that dynamic range is key. I think that in terms of pedagogical style, I don't know whether we're letting ourselves off the hook too easily or not, or giving ourselves an impossible challenge. But it seems like, I mean, often what you want to know as a teacher is, if I did it differently, how would it turn out differently? And so the most interesting question for me as a teacher is not, is my class good or not? Because what are you going to do with that either way? The more interesting question is, well, if I tried this different way of teaching the material, or if I taught different material, or if we evaluated it differently, or any of the other decisions that you have to make as a teacher, would that work better? And I think that we do have a big opportunity on campus here to learn from the learning sciences, and I think figuring out how to get that into the stream of what faculty are teaching and how we can use that to improve courses is non-obvious, because though all of us have PhDs in our home discipline, very few of us got much training in terms of teaching. So I see that as a big opportunity. I have lots more questions, but I'm guessing that several of you might too. You can speak into the magic microphone that will be coming around.
Yes, there's another aspect, though, on teaching yourself. You gave the story about the calculus teacher said, teach yourself. I attended a job talk here on campus in one of the departments, and they wanted someone new and new quantitative methods, and he came in, fresh with his PhD from UCLA or wherever, and he was presenting the latest quantitative methods for his subject. And then I raised my hand, and I'm not a member of that department, but I raised my hand and I said, well, how do you expect the students in this department to understand the methods you're using? Because that department does not include that curriculum in it. And he looked at me and he said, oh, through online courses, of course. He didn't even think to himself that the university would provide, in that discipline, would provide the education necessary to understand contemporary techniques in that field. He just assumed obviously you can't count on your department. You have to go online. And it was his, this is what leading research people coming out of with a PhD now think. They don't even expect their department to. I'm focusing now, of course, on research students at the graduate level. Those who will go on to an academic career.
So, what do we think about that? Are there some topics that we should simply cede to online classes so that we can free up faculty resources here for other things, or is it totally insane that the department would say, well, you have to go elsewhere?
So I think from my perspective, that is exactly what I imagined my course would be. I mean, when I pitched it to UCOP, my pitch to them was, look, there are opportunities for me to interact with students in a smaller group, right? But that limits them. It's like you said, how many hours in a day do you have? But if I can get the basic information out, which I think they all should have, in the most hyper-efficient way possible, even if that is not, I don't expect that my online class is the quality learning that stamps you as a UCSD alumni when you come out, right? I think that is the background information that every student should have. So this should be a requirement for every student. All 20,000 of them that are here should have to take this online course very efficiently, take it at night, get through with it, get your 3 or 4 units. Then, as a faculty, I can spend my time in an interactive environment and in a much more appropriate way that actually gives them a rich learning experience. I haven't got there yet, but that's my plan. I just have to force the administration to agree with me.
May I add something to this? I think that eventually education will become a marketplace. What MOOCs are doing are turning education into commodity and turning it a marketplace. Anymore, you are not limited to taking this particular professor's class. And professor may, in some cases, rare cases, may be really bad. You have an option. And eventually universities will be forced to accept this free choice. And I was struck, Scott said recently, result of studies published in PNAS, which was a rigorous demonstration that in online active learning class, students learn the educational deliveries are significantly better than in standard class. It will vary between discipline, but as soon as these pedagogical facts are established, university will have very hard time packing students in the classes of 400 people. As soon as somebody at Harvard, at MIT, and I suspect it may have been already done in some discipline, will develop an online course that will provably demonstrate that it's better than 90% of classroom professors, with an exception of superstars, professors that like we have. As soon as it will be demonstrated, it will become, as star teacher from Harvard told in this response to this study, it will become ethically unacceptable to provide standard classroom experience. And I think the first discipline that suffers from this may be basic discipline, exactly the discipline where we have 400 people classes. It may be calculus, it may be biology, it may be introductory computer science. All discipline where we violate all pedagogical rules on how to teach. Why do we teach in 400 people class? Why won't we teach in 1,000 people class, in 4,000 people class? Where is the limit? So we definitely violate minimal pedagogical requirement when we pack students in such huge audiences. It's not education anymore. And at some point, it will become ethical, not only financially or administratively, it will become morally unacceptable to send students to such classes. At university, will have no other choice but to send students to MIT or Harvard course instead of offering our course. To send students to online course instead of offering standard classroom experience.
So it's kind of interesting because, and I agree with a lot of what you just said. One of the fear, I think, of public universities is that if all education is online, and we send the student online, and I was told this, by the way, then we are going to become redundant, and only the superstars are going to teach. And I've been going to be frank. I mean, honestly, wouldn't you all want to have the best teacher at the end of the day, or do you want subpar teachers? If we have to compete on a global basis, what do we want? And that's where I think the university needs to put the money where they're, behind their thinking, which is that we need to be at the forefront of education. I realized, we are a big research institution. One of the other things which I also found very interesting, do you know what is the percentage of a graduate from UCSD actually give back to UCSD? Any idea what percentage? The national average is about 12%. Yeah, I see the number over there. Yeah, it's about 2%. It's pathetic. Why is that? Because the students feel like, like the experience of your sons at Berkeley, sitting in a room with 400 other people where nobody cares, is like, nobody cared about me. Why should I care about them? So, graduate education, I think, is different from that perspective because, again, it's smaller. We have 60 students at School of Pharmacy. There's 120 at the School of Medicine. But still, I think it's a big issue. And from my perspective, I want my kids to have the better education. I'm sure like you guys want as well. So the issue is, do we continue the way and basically put our head into the sand and say, well, nothing is going to happen to us? Or do we get wiped out by other institutions which are going to, if you think about it, Harvard and Stanford and MIT, all these guys are at the forefront. They charge 60 grand, with edX, but they charge 60 grand a year for students. And yet they are right there at the forefront because they realize that online education is going to be, is the future really. Having said this, I also believe with human interaction. I see that it becomes very important. For example, in our course, and that's something that we did, and I suggest if you guys do this, we did Google Hangouts. That was one of the fun part. So every week, the students had the videos that they could watch with their quizzes, and we made the quiz basically so they could take it 10 times. The idea there was not, I want to test you for whether or not you're getting a good grade, but more like knowledge. It was more knowledge. So you don't understand it, retake the test, relook at the video. But every week we would invite students throughout the world. The students who took our course, which was mind-blowing to me, was 80% professionals, i.e. people who had been in pharma for the past 15 years, patent lawyers, MDs. We had very few undergrad or graduate students, actually, for that matter, which was very interesting from my perspective. We had even employers requesting that their people take the course. They had colleagues who had told me that they had basically either their spouse and so forth who said, well, their boss told them that they should take this course because they would understand the process much better. But what was very interesting to me was the interaction with the students through the Google Hangout, and that's very limited. But I think we could expand this substantially. So the chancellor has made, has said that the university needs to create more master's programs. And right now, every school, I'm sure, is evaluating master's programs, and the School of Pharmacy, like everybody else, is evaluating master's programs. A colleague of mine and I, not Dr. Ma, but another colleague who actually worked at the FDA, are proposing something else, which is a hybrid master program, which is going to be both online and in groups coming at UCSD, which could be offered anywhere in the world. And I can tell you, I don't know if it's going to be accepted or not, but I can tell you I'm getting some really big round eyes saying, are you out of your mind or are you insane? Okay, type of looks from certain people, because they are going like, how dare you want to do this? And my view is that I want the best people to basically be able to get the best education. And the only way we are going to be able to do this is if we open it on a global basis. Not everybody lives in La Jolla.
I'm really struck by the social responsibility. I think William and everybody was involved in that part of the role, especially of being a public university, is asking the question, how much can we give back to the community and how much can we offer to the world? Yeah.
Could you address online homework and grading and exams, the quality of the questions that you can ask, if it has to be automatically graded by a computer or if it's going to be graded by their peers who may not really understand the problems themselves? How is that going to compare to the type of homework and grading that you'll get with a small class that's graded by TAs and instructors that know what's going on?
Sure, I can speak to that one a little bit. One of the things that online education has taught me, actually, is that multiple choice questions are a far more powerful format than I had ever previously thought. I was originally trained as an artist, and I love the studio model of education, and I've really worked to bring that online. And what's been interesting is that all of those things are true, all of those things are valuable. There is actually a surprising amount that you can do with relatively easy to assess questions. And I think that, like Pavel said, that's going to look very rudimentary in just a few years. And so for highly technical fields like programming, being able to have computers that are automatically assessing the quality of your answer or of your proof or other things can work. We've seen great uptake of peer assessment. And watching the software that we designed for my HCI class be deployed to more than 100 massive online classes, what that experience taught me is that, it's going to sound really obvious when I say it, but it's a lesson you need to relearn every few years, that new pedagogical techniques work really well when they're implemented well and thoughtfully, and they crash badly when they're implemented badly. And I think that for a lot of the personalized instruction, peer learning, other visions that you're seeing here, I think these are the future. And the wrinkle is that none of them write themselves. That for peer learning to work well, I've analyzed the success of peer learning in a variety of online classes. And it requires that instructors put a lot of work into creating per assignment rubrics and training students per assignment, and being able to have well-written feedback mechanisms for students. And there's about 7 habits that you need to do really well, and they take a lot of teacher time to develop. I mean, the good news is that amortizes in an online class, but it's hard work, and there's no way around that. And I think if you do it well, the feedback that you can get can sometimes be even better than what you see in an in-person class, although I think the variance is higher. And so one thing that we see in online classes is that many students have an excellent experience, but the tails are long, and so sometimes you get stuck with a bozo, and I think that's an issue going forward. I want to get to, I saw a number of hands start to head up. So let's do one quick answer from Pavel, and then we'll take the next question.
So I wanted to add to Glenn's question is, yeah, it's great to have teaching assistant, but are they free? Who are those people who are grading the same boring homework 10 years in a row? What is the overall cost of grading of a course with 400 people over 10 years? It's enormous cost on university. Would it be better to invest $500,000? That's why I'm saying that cost of online courses is non-trivial. Would it be better to invest $500,000 into sophisticated grading system that will eliminate teaching assistant, give them a chance to interact with the student rather than to grade the problem, and finally acknowledge that what we view as the free TAs are not really free to university, and we are not enriching their experience. Let's be frank. It's not enrichment of their training when they grade calculus work, right?
Pavel will be taking checks afterwards. So we'll do this question here and then to Beth. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. So you spoke a little bit to this already with the description of the master's program, but I'm curious about what hybrids you see coming up between traditional classrooms and online classrooms, but also between online classrooms and undergraduate research.
Undergraduate research.
So I haven't thought about the undergraduate research from that perspective, but for the so I'd like also to answer the other question as well. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Khan Academy. Yeah? Raise your hand. Yeah? Khan Academy. Okay. Sorry, that's my French accent. Khan Academy actually allows you to grade the work that you do in progress very, very well. So there are ways to do this. And I think that it would be much better as well to do, if you are teaching calculus, to do it individualized rather than having a classroom for 400 students. But anyway, that's my perspective. To go back to your question, first of all, we are right now in the brainstorming stage, so there's nothing been approved yet at the School of Pharmacy. I want to make that very clear. So since I'm being recorded here, and I'm just part of one of the faculty who is submitting this proposal. Personally, I think it's the future. Okay, and why do I think it's the future? I think it's the future because, again, if we are going to offer a master's program to students, I want to have, the best students like we have, for example, in the School of Pharmacy. We get about, I think it's 3,000 applications for 60 spots with a minimum GPA of 3.8 with a number of requirements. So if you can imagine, it's extremely competitive. Well, master's program, it depends what we want to do. If we really want to do, a master's program, I look at education a certain way. I look at education, it's great to have a general education, but it's also very important to have an education that's going to get you a job at the end of the day, and that's going to make the society, a better place without sounding too corny. And what I mean by this is basically continuing to create innovators and people who really can be at the forefront. So creating a master's program just for a master's program, I have, some problem with this, and maybe because I'm from a technical background. And when I looked at the master's program we are looking at, for example, at the School of Pharmacy, is I believe the hybrid format is going to be best served. Why is that? First of all, not all the expertise exists within the walls of this university, as we all know. And when I have people in my course who come from big pharma or big biotech or FDA, and if they can record their class and their course online in a video, and then deliver it to thousands of people, that's going to have a huge impact. And then what we can do is create these hybrid where people would come here for short periods of time, let's say a few weeks, where they get training face-to-face, working with groups. You can also assign them groups, which is another thing, which is very difficult probably to do when you have 17 or 20,000 students. I mean, how do you do that? And that's one of the things we are struggling with right now, because there are some logistical issues, but I think that could be addressed if it's done properly, and there is the resources. The students are going to learn within themselves as well, and that's what we see. So not only are they going to learn from the videos, not only are they going to learn from the interaction with the instructor, but they are also going to learn from who is sitting at the table. If you have people who, again, have this multifunctional background, they are going to be able to provide, knowledge that another person might not have. I mean, I see it in our class where you have a PharmD students interacting with a business students or a lawyer who has, the PharmD students might have no idea about IP, intellectual property, or trademarks, or freedom to operate. Well, the lawyer is going to be able to explain that to the other students without me even getting into the mix. So that's why I look at hybrid structure being the strongest. And I see this with at other levels as well in the K through 12, which I think is also very, very important.
So I have a very explicit question, but it stems from my personal interest in what I think MOOCs are going to contribute to us as a society, and particularly us as academics, and that is the fact that the data that we have, and I'm so excited about all the data that's going to be collected on MOOCs, because I hope it'll change our cultural norms as instructors and as faculty to each other and, on the record, simply lie about teaching and learning. We state things anecdotally without any facts or data or analysis or methodology, and just put it out there, and we all just let each other slide on it. To that extent, I'm interested in how each of you has learned from the data that perhaps has been collected in your MOOC. And I had a specific question that you could use to start, which is, you mentioned, Steve, that you were very excited about how the students could experience your materials efficiently. In what things did you do that you think increased the efficiency of students learning in the online setting?
So we're early days on this, and the way I have done everything in my life is I start with something really crappy, and I get it up on the wall, and then I look at it and I try to make improvements. So the version that we have put up now, my definition of efficiency is getting the material out, not getting the material understood. So I would be lying to you if I said that I knew that my students were getting this, material well, right? I think that's something that, for me, is what I will learn out of this MOOC, and certainly we have assessment experts now that we talk to, and we will attempt to do this better. But I have not, level one, incorporated any parts of that into mine.
One thing that I think online education is going to teach us broadly is about both the power and the limits of data science. That at first, by being able to see lots of data at scale, you say, holy cow, this is amazing, this is transformative. And then you try and extract something useful from that data, and it's not obvious. And it has the particular danger of post hoc reasoning. That there's an emerging research area on online learning that has me both very excited and very worried, because I'm seeing a large number of papers of the form. We did a bunch of navel-gazing in the data, and here's the story that we'd like to tell you about it. And I'm not at all convinced a lot of the time that story is true. And so I think a huge opportunity in the online world is to be able to actually run the experiment and to see, if we explain it this way, does it work better than if we explain it that way? And in my field of human-computer interaction, when we build user interfaces, it used to be the case that back when software was delivered on floppy disks and CD-ROMs and things like that, that you would build your software. When you got it mostly done, you'd bring somebody into the lab, you'd watch them use it. When they swore, you'd write down where that happened, and you would fix that usability bug. Then you'd bring the next person into the lab, and when they swore, then you would fix that bug. And you would do this until you ran out of money or time, and then you would release your software. And when you released it, you had no idea what anybody was doing with this. And by contrast, when software moved to the web, one extremely powerful side effect of software as a service is that you have the opportunity to deploy multiple alternatives actually in the field, run real controlled experiments, but actually in the world, and be able to see how behavior differs based on those. And when you make changes, you can see how things change over time. That has really revolutionized our ability to build a theory of human-computer interaction. And I'm hopeful that we can do the same for learning.
I would just want to add one more comment to this, which is, although I am certainly an advocate of, efficient in some senses, that there is another component of learning that we do in my lab, which is as inefficient as it can possibly be, right? Which is learn by doing. We actually get students in, because I'm in a biological department, we actually have organisms that are alive. And the only way you really understand those is to come in and kill them for several weeks until you learn how to keep them alive. And that is not something that you can do inefficiently. But because we do it that way, we employ more undergrads out of my labs into the biotech companies here than I think any other lab on campus. And that is because they realize that, you get a great theoretical education out of UC San Diego, but if you haven't worked in one of the labs, you have no clue how to do anything in biology that really matters to most of the biotech companies. So in that sense, I don't want to be more efficient there. The efficiency that I am putting forward is on the places where we can put information out to a large number of people without me being present. That's efficient in that sense, and that gives me an opportunity to spend my time elsewhere, which might be very inefficient, but much more valuable to students.
Let's take another question. Yes, sir.
So sense that I get it, went back to, it's only you who. And I want to go back to your original comment on mastery, and what you're pointing to. I never thought about it quite in this way. But when you talk about mastery learning, and what most of you seem to be talking about is that we have a teaching repertoire, and a MOOC then, it's not, teaching a MOOC is one way to get more personalized education for our students in the other areas. So instead of teaching large courses 4 times, we teach one large course in a series of more personalized courses as one way to think of it as more of an ecology of both learning as maybe mastery, or also a different sense of learning of a discipline or whatever. And so how would you do that departmentally or structurally within a university for the VC of?
That's an interesting question. Maybe I'll take a crack at this, even though I'm not the one who probably should do that. But you have to be willing to do it, and you have to be willing to actually change the rules. Instead of people being afraid of offering classes online and hybrid classes, by the way, I agree completely that the hybrid classes is the model that I think will work the best, which is where you have, you put the onus on the students, which is that you have to you have to be accountable for your own learning. And I'm here as someone who can help you as a resource. So when you are stuck with that video, you are stuck with that calculus problem, you come to me. So it becomes really a lot more, personalized. I would hate the day where we are going to do all medical and pharmacy education with basically just virtual organs and virtual computers, because the first day you see a patient, that might be very scary. So I think that that's probably not going to happen. But at the same time, I'll be honest, I do telemedicine sometime with my GP because I don't want to go in, and I'll tell him, hey, I had this and what have you. I'll go back on email, and even though I'm told, no, it's not very secure, but at the end of the day, who cares? And he responds to me within 5 minutes. And if there is, let's say, a dermatological problem or something like this, I mean, a lot of dermatology now is being done that way. A lot of radiology is being done that way. So there's a lot of things that can be done with the efficiency. I think the issue has been the willingness to accept the technology and the fear that technology is, basically going to take over everything else instead of using it as a tool. I think that's one of the issues that I see where people, from a department basis, I can tell you that many people do not want to have all the courses online. They just don't. Why? I don't know. I still don't understand this. But personally, I think that the universities who are not going to adapt are going to go the way of the dinosaur. That's my perspective, and I might be completely wrong. But if you look at the top universities, they're all going through that.
I think with mastery learning, it's for all these things, I think that it's going to be an iterative process, and I think that's especially true for mastery learning. If this is a new term to use, Saul Kahn's book, The One World Schoolhouse, actually is a really forceful advocate for mastery learning. And I think that in most departments on campus, there are a couple of basic skills that we want to make sure that everybody has. And, take as long as you want, but we want to make sure that you know this. And a really simple one that I've taught is soldering. Super useful skill, important to have. In about an hour workshop, we can get it covered. Doesn't need to be part of a 4 units, class. And I think that we'll start to see departments dip their toe in the water of mastery learning with small modules. Or Seth Lara, the Dean of Arts and Humanities, has been working on a project for creating a storytelling workshop that might be a weekend-long thing. Again, it doesn't need to be quarter length. I think I saw another hand. Yeah.
Scott, that's an interesting point that you just raised about time, right? I mean, when we think about online, the potential to not only expand globally, right, to open up our doors to any student, it also enables us to think about time differently. And so I think we're so set in academia to have quarters or semesters. So the idea of seat time for learning and the idea of, modularized learning versus quarter-based or something like that. Anyway, I wonder if you could speak to the different ways that we might allow learners to engage with our content in a way that's meaningful, that might also be beyond our current constraints, time constraints.
Well, I'll just make one comment. So we also teach a certificate program here. And I think the really nice thing about that is that's 7 classes that you take online, and then you show up here in the summer for 3 weeks of hands-on experience. So that is certainly something that we could not do, or I wouldn't do, in a 10-week undergrad course, but it works out really well for a certificate program. And obviously, one of the enormous advantages that we haven't talked about yet in MOOCs is that you get continuing education, right? This now goes on forever, right? I know that I was not an energy expert 5 years ago, and I've sort of self-taught myself this over the last 5 years, and I think this is actually really what the future is, right? That education isn't 4 years at a university anymore. In fact, I've seen somewhere, you sign up for Stanford now, and it's not a 4-year degree, it's a degree. And if it takes you 4 years or 14 years, it's kind of immaterial. It's just you sign up and get it. So I think this is enormous opportunity going forward.
I want to do a follow-up on that. Just bringing in the assessment component. So, I know that there's some research in Australia around letting people come into their bachelor's and assess out of, different units. Because your example of 4 years or 14, what about 1 year or 2? So I just wonder how that's coming across in your conversations with your colleagues and department chairs.
So, it's kind of interesting, and that goes back to the personalized education. We talk about personalized medicine. We all dislike the fact that basically when you go to the doc, he has a list of medication he's going to give you. Oh, you have hypertension, this is the protocol, this is what you're going to get, without knowing whether or not actually you're going to be responsive. And for those of you who are in the medical sciences, the antihypertensive drug actually have 50% efficacy level, meaning that half the population actually does not respond to the drug they are going to give you. Well, it's the same with education from my perspective. So what I view with online and personally the University of the Future is if you have, as was mentioned earlier, very bright students who can, do a ton of classes really rapidly and master, it's not just doing a class, but really master the content, i.e. it builds on top of one another. This is the opportunity for someone to get, a bachelor's degree in 2 years if they have the intellectual capabilities. Now, how about the person who's working because he or she has a family that they need to support and they never had the opportunity to go to school and decide to go back to school? And they do it in 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever number of years it is. There is no, why is there a reason that it has to be done in such amount of time? Actually, the problem I have, facing a couple of years that my kids are going to go to college, the UC system right now, only, I think it's about 50% of students graduate in 4 years. If you do the opportunity cost of that and the total cost on an NPV basis, for those of you who are not in finance, net present value calculated of how much it's going to cost you, it's staggering. And not only that, but then, there's other problems which we don't talk about, which is the productivity of this country and everything else. So to me, the opportunity of hybrid classes and online classes is that the student could then advance at their own pace, rather than being dictated by, well, this is the time, and it's either now or you don't get it. So I think we need to adapt to that as well.
And there is another aspect of this, in addition to superachiever that you talked about. We often have students with learning disabilities in our classes, and we have an obligation to help the students. So if Office for Learning Disability has decided that the student needs 2 or 3 times more time at the midterm, it means that this student probably needs 2 or 3 more time during my lecture, because my lecture will be completely lost for this student. Would it be socially responsible just to give this student online possibility to follow my lecture at the student's speed?
I think that, one thing I like about your question is that thinking about what we can do beyond the 4-year university that, as people have said, is huge. And it's not just about the fast students versus the slow students. When I meet with, for example, as a cognitive and computer science professor, when I meet with technology executives, what they worry about are not primarily computer science questions usually. If you're a CEO of a large technology company, most of the questions that you have are likely people questions. And I'm struck as part of a faculty on social sciences that we have a huge service to offer to, for example, people who got an engineering degree from UCSD 20 years ago have ascended through the ranks, and the challenges that they face in their life now and the things that they're curious about in their life now, it could be Civil War history, it doesn't just need to be what happens at work. They're going to change over your life, and so I think the online world offers a huge opportunity for that. Ramesh.
Yeah, so I have a specific question. Having finished recording your courses, did you sit through it from the perspective of a student? Did you listen to yourself from start to finish, all 44 lectures or whatever the number was? And did that change you in any specific way?
Absolutely. So Coursera, after running our course, wanted us to repeat it as soon as possible. And we refused, because we collected 1,200 discussion threads from our Coursera students. This is educational gold mine that I would never have got in traditional teaching. In addition to 1,200 discussion threads, and some of them had 100 discussions, right? In addition to this, our electronic system had at every paragraph, student was allowed to give particular criticism, particular question, linked to particular place in the course. It's roughly another 1,000 hints that our course is offered. As a result, we probably will spend at least 3 months to do adaptive learning. So we adapt the course, incorporate all these 1,200 threads. We will adapt the course so when we see the student doesn't understand something, at some point we see this comment is simply not because we are wrong, we are bad teachers, but because the student doesn't have this background, we will send them to recharge station where we will explain what is needed. And that's why I'm telling, my view is that MOOCs as talking head are limited. You need to have electronic book in addition, because otherwise, what can you do getting this 1,200 comments? It's very difficult to change video. And you basically need to reduce this, and once again, large investment. But when you have electronic component to this, you can simply change it without even changing your lecture. So there is huge, huge work after offering the, and sometimes I open.
I think we have time for one, possibly two more questions. Deborah.
I want to make a comment and come back to the infrastructure, to the social infrastructure. And maybe it betrays me as a primatologist, but when I look around the room, what I see is 2 years now of the education initiative that Barbara Suri and Klemmer have led. The effort that Ramesh Rao has offered with TEL Initiative. The online learning faculty workshop that happened in last summer that Jeff Elman, who couldn't be here today, was a real push to the point where now we have faculty, we have ACMS, we have Center for Teaching Development. We're starting to have a kind of community that can be a holding tank for this to actually move forward. If you want to comment, that's fine.
Speaking of Jeff Elman, I was at his thank you celebration yesterday, and he said a very important question that he asks himself is, why are we here? And it struck me that it's relevant today because we were talking about MOOCs, but here we are face to face. So I think this was brought up a little bit before, but I'd like to comment about what is done best face to face and what is best done online. Do you folks have any conclusions about that, or if we move towards hybrid courses, how do you separate out what's done face-to-face versus what's done?
I think that in certain disciplines, I would prefer to go into a real classroom. For example, I am not sure I would like to go to a MOOC on philosophy. If I'm privileged to be in a to good university, I'm not sure I would go to a MOOC in poetry or in medieval history. But in technical disciplines, we have to teach students certain skills. We all, compared to our professors, we all may be either people with learning disability compared to this person, or we may be superachievers, depending on what pace this professor chooses in the class. And that's why the importance of classroom, from my perspective, is just inspiring students. That's it. Students doesn't need to see me reciting in the classroom. Students can simply watch my video and it will be the same effect. These 5 minutes that I can afford in the lecture to interact with students and inspire them, that's the most important part of live lecture from my perspective. But how much inspiration can you do in a 400 people classroom? If you divide this inspiration over 400 people, you really do not get banks on the money.
So I think that the dividing line that's relevant is not always online versus in person, because the diversity of online options and the diversity of in-person options is really large. And so I think that in some ways the video-centric online class is similar to a good lecture or a bad lecture. And I think that in other ways, some of the best adaptive learning experiences that you've seen online are a lot more similar with a good flipped classroom than they are with other online experiences. And so I think the scientific opportunity that we had, and you and others have been pushing on this, is how do we articulate what the actual learning goals are, and how do we line up the pedagogical strategy with what we hope that students will will actually learn.
Because I just have to say to Pavel, and we're in the same department, so we can argue this, that you're leaving out the philosophy of introductory programming course. You know, a goal of our introductory programming course is, in fact, to get students the skill to be able to write programs. But it's actually also to give them the analysis abilities to think like a computer scientist, which is very similar to, you know, what you wanted to have out of that philosophy course. It's not a one-way dissemination of information or a development of skill, but of a development of thinking processes and habits. And that does, as you said, that's something that's way more interesting to be able to do interactively.
Doug.
So all of you have done at least one MOOC. How many of you are going to do a new one, or are you just going to repeat ones that already exist?
So our plan is, and this is one of the, I think one of the super advantages of MOOCs is that we can add on modules of this. So what's occurred to us, you know, as we watched our first one, is there were enormous gaps in what it was we were attempting to communicate. Some of those are in specific technical areas, and so we can go out and do those additional, you know, videotaping of those. And some of them are, you know, not so much in the technical areas, but just the philosophy, as you say, what we communicate. So I think we'll continue to expand ours and just add modules until they're completely overwhelming and out of control, and then we'll break them into individual pieces again.
So we are going to, we offered it once last year, and because we have been getting so many emails and people wanting to reoffer the class, we're going to reoffer it again in September. The issue for me is, again, what was talked about earlier, which is budget. There's no budget behind. I would love to be able to expand this. I mean, the whole idea of the master's program, for me, I see this as another adventure that could be very, very interesting depending on what we decide to do as a school. But the issue is budget. And unless we have, you know, budget where we can actually improve and do additional modules, it's not going to happen out of thin air. So.
Glad you mentioned it, and that also relevant to the question that Deborah asked. So budget is the key issue. Investment into MOOCs is the key issue. They do not come for free. So if I spend 3 months just sifting through feedback from students, it means I don't do research for 3 months. Somebody has to account for this. And it's remarkable that there is such little financial, there is a lot of interest, of course, but there is almost non-existing support for MOOC development. There is little realization that ILTA program, for example, provides only minimum funds. They won't allow me. They fund me at the level of $110,000. That's not enough for me to develop a course that requires programmers, that requires significant time commitment. And it just, with all the development at grassroots developments at UCSD, these developments was not followed up with administrative help the same, let's say, Berkeley people have. They have MOOC labs, there is very active MOOC conversation supported by financial commitments on campus, and it just doesn't happen at our campus. But answering your question, I'm offering one more MOOC, and this MOOC, our first MOOC was extremely complex. Some people thought it's one of the most complex MOOCs they took, and commitment from every student was 12, average commitment was 12 hours a week. And we are offering a new MOOC for students who dropped in the first few weeks of our class, and it will be MOOC for bioinformatics for biologists. So biologists can learn bioinformatics.
So as I mentioned, Pavel will be around afterwards accepting checks, and I wanted to thank all of you because I agree with Deborah that seeing a number of these initiatives come together, seeing what's happened over these first 2 years as a number of pilot programs is extremely exciting. And as you can see, everybody's chafing at the bit to do the next thing, and I hope that all of you will join us in making these next 2 years even more successful. Thanks for coming. Great to see you.